Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Parting's PvT Part 3. In Day 9 Daily number 450, where we learned to be a better gamer. Part 1 was the intro, and probably the most important part of Part 1 was showing when we deviate from this mass gateway style. Part 2 and 3 really showed us that even when we're doing, or even when we're in different situations and things aren't really going predictably, we still just follow the same core ideas, and the build plays out very nicely. Or I don't want to say the build, the strategy, the technique plays out very nicely. In this game, we're going to see the strategy and technique play out not very nicely. So that way we can see some pitfalls to avoid. And as many of you may recognize this game, this is the famous Parting MKP Game 1 from MLG Columbus 2012. Everyone was really excited about this match, and holy shit did this match deliver. Whoa! It delivered! Some incredibly good work of pairing. Whoopsie daisies. I had that turned up really loud because I was rocking out to some Blue Sky Black Death beforehand. Now, we see Parting goes for, I would say, the most common scout timing, especially if you include ladder players. Just scout right after gateway. Clean and simple and easy. Spots nothing. Now, let's go ahead and follow along with the Parting cam. Again, what is our basic strategy that we want to do? We want to hit them hard with mass gate units. We want to try to not build some of those large gateway units, the Stalker Zealot in particular. And we have some notes on how we chrono. But what did Parting end up seeing? Ooh. What did Parting end up seeing? He saw the good old no gas, he saw the good old one racks, and now he sees the expand. Clear as day, Parting knows what is up. So let's see how Parting ends up playing it out. Builds but a single Stalker. Why do we want that Stalker? For the map control, as we've said multiple times. Another pylon going down. And there's our Nexus. Look at Parting. Look how boss he is. Just went straight up to the top left. He had the probe there monitoring the center of that map. Now getting a simulator number 2, so that way he can focus largely on the sentries, getting those gateways down on 5 minutes, so that way they'll line up nicely with this warp gate. Chrono boosting heavily on everything before that. Now, MKP is doing something a little bit weird. He's going double racks, double reactor, and a factory. He is going for, people jokingly call it the 222, but this is essentially a Marine tank opening. So we see Parting now getting up all the warp gates. And remember, I guess I won't call it by number. Let me start that explanation over again. I couldn't decide what order I wanted to do it, and I just stumbled over myself, so let's try again. In the very first game we saw against Alive, we saw not the fastest expansion ever. We saw a couple units get made, and then he went for the expansion, and he was able to afford 5 gates. In the second game we saw, Parting saw the early expand was happening, and then built the Nexus, and then built the Cybernetics core. In the third game, Parting built his frickin' Nexus first. In other words, we've progressively seen earlier and earlier Nexuses, and consequently more and more gateways for this 8 to 9 minute push. So at this point in time, Parting didn't get the earliest Nexus ever. He was focusing largely on the, focusing on that Stalker at the start, delaying this Nexus a little bit, seeing what's up. And still, we see 5 gates total. As many gates as he can afford. A sort of economical assimilator planted down in there. So we're now going to see Parting go for this push. It's a little bit earlier of a move out, but still between 8 and 9 minutes is the big money. This is one of the big brilliances of Marine King Prime's build. The tank siege mode finishes up just barely after 8. So siege mode will actually be available and ready to rock during the midst of all of this. I want you to note that this push is still good that we've seen. It's been a pretty even exchange. Marine King Prime has lost more Marines in that unit counting station. We see pretty even. This is pretty as expected. But when you see that mixture of Marine tank, what do you immediately think is going to happen? Some kind of big Marine tank push. I would probably anticipate Banshees would be something that would follow this up as well. Pretty Pretty common follow-up play we're seeing a lot of players do on the Korean ladder. But this is somewhat of an awkward situation you may find yourself in if you're doing this style, where you feel kind of like, ah, crap, I really need to get that robo up for the observers, and I need to be able to have Colossi up. Colossi is the big reason that players will be getting the robo now, because, hell, if I'm up against a ton of Marines in a 1-1-1 and I lose, how many Marines are you going to have if he does this style of play? But I'm honestly kind of torn as to what the best decision is in this circumstance. For now, what I will note is I'm going to go through one watching of this game and just say the what of what's going on. Parting is trying to delay this push as much as possible. He just doesn't want to be hit. Just really, really, really very badly does not want to be rained down upon with pain. So he ends up getting the observer out. He's starting to get the sense, yeah, there aren't really any banshees coming. Would have seen some of those by now. But I sure as hell better get my Robo Bay up as fast as possible. There's the Forge +1. Seems very reasonable. Marine King Prime starts to gather his forces together. And now Parting is in an awkward spot. He really needs to chrono boost out this Colossus. He really needs to chrono boost out this range. This is actually the only thing that doesn't need to be chrono boost out. But he's devoted some chrono boost to that. So suddenly, we both need a Colossus, and we need a Colossus with range really, really fast. In other words, this is a super, super awkward, difficult position to be in as Parting in this circumstance. And now, kind of going for the Twilight Council, I think that these two are a clear mistake. I definitely think that just going for the +1 is much better than getting all that down, because we're just not really going to have the resources to be able to deal with this. So, as all this jazz is happening, Parting trying to get up all his stuff, and Marine King Prime just sieges up, and we only just recently got range. So we couldn't really afford to move down earlier, but I actually think that... Sorry, I'm still going into the analysis. I still need to just focus on the what, like I said I would. But what happens when this mix comes up? Well, we had to spend so much energy getting those Colossi up that we ended up being in a position like this, where we're pinning ourselves back. Parting trying to do a little bit of everything. Templar with Storm, Zealot with legs, has these Colossi up, a Marine King Prime just sitting cool as ice. Having more bases, having way more food, having better upgrades coming up. I mean, everything is in Marine King Prime's court, and he wins shortly thereafter. And as we watch this little micro exchange, there's really not much you can do when these tanks are at the backside. Only 2 tanks right now, not a huge number of tanks. Party manages to almost break down, doesn't do it, and there's the good game. But the key period of time right here, we're shoving so hard, we will always get a clean scout on what he's up to. And by the way, if you're ever breaking through this with ease, immediately build a robo, because the only time you'll break the front with ease is if he's going for some sort of really fast tech play that could include a Banshee. Otherwise, you're just going to kill him, but no matter what, you'll get a good sense. But here, the robo and the gas, I think you have to do immediately, but I'm still torn. Is it better to throw down the Twilight Council, focusing on Storm, Zealot with leg speed, Archons? That will definitely help you deal with the mixture that could be thrown at you. You still do need to get this robo up for the observers, but some sort of immortal Templar mix, I don't know. It's just tough. Regardless, I think that there's still a possibility of saving ourselves if we just get all our chrono boost on these 2 things. And now what you're probably hearing me do right now is try to think about solutions, what would possibly work. All that is an example of how you can get into tricky spots playing this style as Parting. In games 1, 3, and 4 that we saw with Parting style, it looked seemingly invincible. It just looked like he's just crushing and rolling again and again and again. Never want to give that illusion. It's a stylistic thing. So here we're in a little bit of a funky spot. I mean, maybe what the best solution is to keep units out in the middle of the map and try to get a read on whether or not he has some sort of Banshee or drop coming. Something like this, but I mean, when this happens, maybe just ride out and meet him and try to buy time, because the last thing you want is to be contained. It's just so hard. Tanks are so good. Tanks are just so good. So that's going to wrap up the daily. I'm going to open up Marky's good old question grabber. Marky, I'm going to put in my password. Question grabber. Clear. Question grabber is now grabbing questions. Okay, so what have we learned thus far? Part 1, we had the very, very basic intro to the build of many, many gates, putting on many, many pressure, and being cool to do. And then we also saw in part 1 a very simple, clear look at when we deviate hard. We don't see an expand. He seems to be walling off. We did a little bit of pressure with our Zealot Stalker. We saw bunker at the front. We saw a lot of resistance. I'm cool. I'm going to instantly robo. It's exactly what Parting did, and he ends up playing it out normally. In part 2, we saw the same idea continue to be executed. This getting a lot of gateways up, devoting hard to economy before, then during, devoting almost nothing to economy, all of it to the attack, and afterwards devoting all of our chrono boost to the upgrades. And we saw 2 seemingly different games in part 2. One was with a really fast expand. The other was with really fast 3 nexuses. Those seemingly completely different builds, they ended up looking kind of the same if you viewed it in the appropriate light. And in part 3, we obviously saw the big pitfall, the holy crap, this is what I don't want to be in, and some of the troubles that you may end up in, but basically that. Basically that. Yeah, so PS2 asks a question. Very simple one. What if he just cancels his expansion after I scout it, following up with something like canceling it and going for 5 to 6 racks all in? It is so easy to defend. It is like the easiest thing in the universe to defend. Because what do you have back home? Well, you have a huge number of gateways building and a bunch of sentries waiting. You can easily force field off your front to delay to get that first warp in round. Force field slice to pick off the front row, and then you have another set of gateway rounds warping in. It's so easy. And as a follow-up, I'll ask a question I was seeing a lot throughout. How does this fare against Last Shadow's 6 racks build? Fares pretty much great. I mean, interestingly, Last Shadow's 6 racks build is all about, I'm going to do an early attack and mess with you. And in Parting's case here, Parting style is all about, I'm going to do a huge gateway attack and mess with you. And what happens is both players actually kind of cancel out and don't attack. Parting looks up the ramp and says, God, there's a lot of Marines up there. I can't break that. Last Shadow looks down and says, well, if I attack, he's going to have 8 warp gates warping in. I can't kill that. And both players end up just sort of backing off. It's a pretty clean, easy exchange. And then both players head to that late game. I'm going to increase the font size because my eyes hurt. Spence says, Dear Day 9, is the strategy basically the same if the Terran pushes even before the 8 to 9 minute mark? Yes, only if he's early expanding. For instance, if he's, doing something like a 1-1-1, if he's just doing a fast cloaked Banshee on one base, if he's going for a 2 racks opening, all these completely different circumstances that we're not even addressing today. But if he goes like 1 barracks, expand, or barracks with a reactor, and then expands, or expand, barracks, any really early expand, we always do the 8 to 9 minute push. If he comes at us earlier, wonderful. Free units, gobble them up and just crush it 8 to 9 minutes. Let's go ahead and take 2 more questions, and then I'm hungry. HGL finals will be on the archives within 24 hours. Let's see here. Malice asks a very reasonable question. Excuse me. Surely at some point you need late game observers to help with army positioning and movement. I remember games where Parting would get tons of observers, but what's the appropriate timing? I generally feel that if there's a ton of circumstances where you're going to be able to do battle. All in part 2, we saw big attacks going on at the front for like 3 minutes in length. Long battles in the course of the game. In spots like those, you're not really going to need an observer because all the action's happening there, and he has to bring all his stuff to the front. If for some reason, let's say you're up against a Last Shadow style 6 racks, and you move up and you see 2-3 bunkers and a ton of Marines, back off, insta-robo, insta-tech, tons of observers. You're going to need a lot of them to do these sort of positioning. But the important thing is to delay them quite a bit. The games where Parting does get a lot of observers are games where he doesn't really do this big push, where he doesn't early expand and focuses on Zealot Archon on 7 gate with a kind of delayed forge upgrades. That's what I've seen him do it on. Did that in GSL against someone who I don't remember, so... But, yeah, if you're not doing this build and you still want to be going gateway tech, I even saw Feast do something like that at IEM where he just goes straight 7-gate Zealot Archon. Those are circumstances where it might be appropriate to get somewhat of an earlier robo for observers and then just a lot of observers. Alright, I'm just going to take this as the last question because it's so easy. Voldemort91 says, where can I find the Parting replay pack you use in your daily? It is the MLG 2012 Columbus replay pack. Done. Fun Day Monday tomorrow, the Planetary Fortress Attack will be starting at 10 a.m. Pacific, so in about 14 hours that daily will be on. Ha! I better finish preparations for it. So I'll see you bright and early then, and next week, All Europe Week, and we'll conclude on Sunday with Euro subscriber mono battles. Euro subscriber mono battles, 'cause I am a